Hello, this is Mitch from Woodworking. I've had several requests for a shop tour, and this is probably the first time with 10 years past, 10 years future that this is going to be clean, and I figured I better do it now. This is the cleanest the shop's been. Actually, I've done nothing but clean for like a week and have got a whole lot done. So the tour is going to encompass several things. I'm going to go over my tools, but at the same, and the shop layout, but at the same time I want to touch a little bit on the efficiency of working in a shop and saving yourself some footsteps, and the way that you create work zones so you don't spend a lot of time running from one end to the other. So as we go through the tour, you'll see a little bit of that. I'm going to go all the way through the shop from here and start at the back where the lumber's stored, which actually is off on the side over here. I've got a lean-to type shed that used to be there that I converted into an office / wood storage. Had the compressor and dust collector over there. The compressor has been moved outside, and the dust collector will soon be moved outside, and once I move those, that'll create a space for a CNC machine if I figure out how to afford to build one. So let's start off. I've got the camera on a tripod because I couldn't hold it still if I had to, so we're going to walk with this. From the front of the shop, this is actually an assembly and finishing area. We're going to go back from that, regress back to the pre-assembly and sanding area and shaping, and then all the way back to what would be considered the milling area. And once we get back from the milling area, we can go through that doorway that I was talking about into the side where I've got lumber storage and an office area. Now this is the lean-to that used to be back here, and what you can see is I've got lumber storage on the left and a little bit of a workspace on the right. I've got a place for my laptop. I've got a phone system hanging here. Piece of marble here if I need a place good and flat. Got to have a stereo. Got speakers here and speakers in there. Lumber storage here where I've got Brazilian cherry here. I've got short stuff here, everything from wingy to purple heart. Mostly here's all maple. I've got some babinga and walnut in here, and then up here is some mostly poplar and oak, and then the top is just building materials. 3 lights that I'm going to end up putting up eventually. These are little LEDs I got at Walmart at Christmas time. It's like, hey, it makes a great light for now until I put something else up. If we turn around and look in the other direction, the dust collector and where the compressor used to be at the back side of this. The dust collector, I've got basically one of those trash can adapters to make me a separator, which actually works great. And the problem I've got with the dust collector is, one is the noise, 2 is the dust. I've built a shed out back that is going to house the dust collector, and what I did is I put a return vent in the wall to allow, with a furnace filter on it, to allow the dust collector air back into the shop. Because at 1250 cubic feet per minute, it takes about 3 minutes for this dust collector to suck all the heat out of the shop in the winter. So by having a return, the room that it's in outside is completely insulated, completely encapsulated, and so I'll return all my warm air back through that furnace filter into the shop. Now production wise, well, let me back up. I've got a few shorts and a couple of pieces of like burl or whatever down here that I've stored in here. It's kind of an overflow. And then of course I said I've got all the lumber up here. I've got common hardwoods, building a new shed for it outside. And as we come through this door, you see in the distance there is my sink and some more shorts, as well as some turning blocks and some of my figured wood in here. This is a nice piece of quilted maple, about 2 inches thick, 28 inches long there behind the back of that. And down in here I've got some oak and walnut, and I just store a lot of shorts and things that I've got back here. That's a big piece of curly maple right there. But back here in the milling area, you've got the table saw, joiner, and the planer, of which I've got a backup and under it, all right here common to each other. Now what I do, if you set this up like this, as I get the wood from the other side, I could bring a piece of wood out. Say it was a longer piece, I'd bring it in. I've got a trim saw. Take a trim saw and a speed square, cut my length. Then I take the piece of wood back, keep out here what I want. Once I've got that, I can lay it flat on the joiner, get me one good side. Turn it up on edge on the joiner, get me one good edge. Come over here to the table saw, trim it, get a third good edge. Then all I've got is the top, pull the planer out in the middle of the floor, finish the top, and I've got a completely dimensioned piece of lumber. Almost everything I use starts similar to this, sawmill run almost. That's a piece of walnut. But almost everything I use is sawmill run stuff. I hardly buy anything that's already dimensioned. On my table saw, I've got a few different items that I really like to use. I'm sold on Incra, so hate to sound so much like that, but and it is expensive. But it's taken me 10 years to get all this stuff, and it's a matter of finding the sales, finding when something's good, going to the woodworking shows, and buying what I can when I can. This Incra fence locks down to a 32nd of an inch, adjustable to a 1,000th of an inch, and is able to be I can cut a 5-inch board today, and I can come back in a month from now and cut a 5-inch board, and they're 1,000th accurate to each other with no changes, no measurement. I can measure my board what I want, and according to the setup over here, I can just set it to what I want. I also use micro jig push blocks. As you can see, that's saved some fingers already. This way or this way, according to which way you need to go. I've also got some feather boards for ripping that have got rare earth magnets that I can use here. In feed to the table, out feed out of the table, or I can actually set them down and use them here as feather boards to go behind. I firmly believe in using jigs, feather boards, or whatever you need to keep your hands out of the saw blade. Same difference here. Feather board, it can be set up, dropped into place, adjusted, and tightened down, and then you bring your fence over to your feather board, and you're not got your fingers in there. And some people say, well, it's Incra this, Incra that, and miter slides and miter tables. Well, I'll tell you what. I'll show you a miter table or miter slider. That right there is made by Incra. It's set to a 45. I think I've used it once. What I use more than that is my homemade sled. It does have an Incra fence on it, but that's homemade out of MDF and oak. And that sled comes in very handy when you multiple cross cuts in the same areas. Now once I leave the table saw, I've got the drill press. This second area is kind of a more of a shaping area, but I've got the drill press here, and then I'll bypass the buffer. And I've got the bandsaw here, router here. That's a table that I built using all Incra parts. And then I've got a small lathe over here. So now once I'm done getting the wood close to what I want, I can go from the router, the bandsaw, to the drill press, or back to the table saw without making too much walk. It's just right here. Once I've got all my pre-cutting done and everything, I move forward to the pre-finishing. Now I'm going to walk through this and come back. I've got a 1632 sander, and then I've got 2 sanders on a turntable that I built over here. Now I'm going to bring through here and turn around. The 1632 is the thickness sander. I really love the thing to death. Absolutely has to have dust collection though, and it has gotten extremely pricey. That model right there is now about 1,800 bucks. 10 years ago it was 700. This Lazy Susan turntable thing here, I've got an oscillating belt sander on the front with an oscillating spindle sander on the back. The ductwork goes into a downdraft that goes out to the back and up to the dust collection system, and the way it's designed, there's only one duct in the cabinet, but I've got 2 ducts on the sander. And whichever sander is rotated to the front is the one that gets the dust collection. So whichever sander I'm using, I rotate it to the front. Along the same lines, I have got a secondary workbench along the side here where I've got a disc sander along with some burls and blocks I've been messing with. I've got the scroll saw and a hollow chisel mortiser, along with a little bit of extra space to work here. If this is something nobody's really noticed before, the scroll saw is set on an angle. When you've got a scroll saw on an angle like this, when you're working on your piece, you're looking straight down the blade. And when you're looking straight down the blade, you can see what you're doing better than if you were down at an angle and working from the side of the blade. It's almost like I wish you could do that with a drill press. I've got this thing here I call the Green Monster. It's a Central Machinery Harbor Freight version of a belt sander. If I need to surface a block, a small block or anything, I just throw it on there, and it's very quick and easy. Like I said, this is the assembly area. So once I've come past the sanders, I've got clamps here. I've got the workbench. Over here on the top, these are all pin, magnifying glass, letter openers, box hinges, pretty much anything you need for whatever you're putting together. And as I mentioned before, I had moved the compressor outside. Now my manifold for the compressor is right here. And it's kind of hard to see from here, but that furnace duct, speaking of which, my compressor just vented liquid. I've got it set to vent automatically every 45 minutes. Then from over here, if you can see behind those clamps is that white furnace filter. That's the return air for the dust collector when I get it moved. The other thing that I really like that I've done for the dust collector is I've put in an eco gate. I'm putting in an eco gate. I haven't finished putting it in yet. But this right here is the controller, which is right next to where that window is coming from the dust collector. The eco gate uses vibration sensors. And you put a vibration sensor on the motor of each piece of equipment. It's got an automatic gate that goes on the dust pipe at each piece of equipment. And when the sensor senses vibration, it will open that gate, and this controller will turn on the dust collector that's in the room outside. And then when the vibration goes away, it's got a 20-second timeout. It turns the dust collector back off. So, as it is, that's what I've got for a shop. If you look at Hendrix Woodworking and look at my albums, I've got one called Dirt Garage to Wood Shop, I believe is what it's called. And it's the transformation of this shop from an old dirt garage. I think this place was built probably in the 30s. But I leveled all this out. I poured the concrete. I cut out the low hanging rafters, raised it up to get myself 8 feet. I actually had to do a stair step in it because it was built on a slope. Built at 2 different times. The back half is cinder blocks. The front half is block wall and frame the rest of the way up. I put a new metal roof on 2 years ago, and the interior, of course, is still a work in progress. But thanks for viewing. If there's any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. I've got one a few minutes ago about setting up a joint, or maybe I'll try to see if I can get some videos out on setting joiners up and things. Love my Soberg table. Actually picked this thing up, like I was saying, watch your sales. This is a $2,800 table. I got it for $1,200 bucks, like I was getting out of woodworking. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you later.